Over the last 25 years, I've hired, promoted, and fired and laid off over 1,000 people. You're about to get the shortcut to hiring an A-player team so you can hire better, promote great team members, and avoid painful firing and layoff decisions. I'm going to share with you the system that I use, and I'll give you the checklists, the calculators, so you can do it too. But before I share it with you, just give me 30 seconds so I can explain why I had to create this process. Then for the rest of the video, I'll share my screen, I'll give you all the tools, I'll tell you how to use them. Now, as usual, if you want free access to everything you see in this video, just click on the link below. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Raj Jha. I founded 5 companies, taken a company public, and I've done over $440 million in sales. But the thing that let me unlock the most success in business is getting the right people on the team. I used to hire too many of these bad fit candidates and deal with underperformers, and I'd end up firing them. And I'd live with team members who weren't carrying their weight for years. But once I got serious about creating a hiring system, I upgraded my teams significantly. If you want to create an A-player team that gives you more freedom in business, this video is for you. Just make sure to watch until the end, because it's more than just about the hiring. It's also about how they onboard to your company, and that can make all the difference. So you want to hire A-player team members. Let's go through the details so you end up with A+ level team members. So we're going to use a hiring process, and it might not be the hiring process that you're used to using or that you've heard others use. It's completely different. And what you're going to do is use this hiring process to assess the good candidates even before you meet them, right? So a lot of the time when you're doing a hiring process, you're kind of getting some resumes, you're vetting the resumes, and then you're doing a lot of the assessment when you meet the candidate. This is fundamentally different. This is a process that's going to save you a bunch of time and get you better candidates. And it's also going to do something really important, which is repel bad candidates. The bad candidates won't even want to proceed in your process. And that's going to save you from the worst and most expensive thing of all, which is a bad hire. Because then you're out a bunch of money, you're out a bunch of time, and you're back fishing for a new potential employee. So let's not waste any time, and let's look at what the process is. So the next is to think of it as a process, right? So hiring is a process. The idea behind the hiring system is that it is a process that is repeatable. It shouldn't be made up every single time. And if you're doing the old school, just pick 3 resumes, interview them, and get the best one, that's a process. And it's so easy that people don't think of it as a process, but it's a bad process. So this is that process that most people use and is bad. It goes source, interview, onboard, unhappy. And we'll look at why. So you source candidates, you put up a job description, you say what the role is. It's like, we're hiring a customer service person. Requirements are blank. Then you take the top 3 resumes that you get, you interview them, you pick the best, and then you onboard them saying, well, here's your desk, you're a support person, great. And usually this candidate, which might have interviewed well, so this person might have interviewed very well, they might have impressed you in some way, but they don't live up to expectations. And very often you just kind of get this B or C player, and you just go with it because your experience hiring is pretty negative. You keep on getting these candidates that aren't really that good and they don't perform that well. So what you're ending up with is a mediocre organization. And so we want to solve this, and we solve it with process that you're going to get right now. This is the A-player hiring process. It is a different one because there's extra steps, and those extra steps do take more time. But the result of that time that you take is an acceleration of the business because you have such better people in the business. So let's look at that. So first it is source, filter, pre-screen, interview, then onboard. So let's go through each one of those. So first is the source of the candidates. Where are you getting them, and who are they, and what are their attributes? So you first need a way of presenting the job description to attract the right candidates and repel the wrong ones, because we don't even want to be talking to the ones that are a bad fit. So the earlier we can screen them out in the sourcing, the better. And all of these steps I'm going to go into detail later, so don't worry about this. At this point, you're just getting the high level. Next is to filter. And we're going to make it intentionally hard for people to get through. So again, the bad fit, the lazy ones, the ones that don't really want to be there or aren't going to be a really motivated employee, they're not even going to get through. Then you're going to pre-screen. So before you are even spending any live time talking to someone, you're going to pre-screen them and then interview. At this point, now you've had enough gates to make sure that the bad fits aren't getting through, that the best ones are percolating to the top. Now you can do an interview process. And we're going to go over two kinds of interview processes that you can use. One is a behavioral interview, and the other one is a simulation interview. Again, details are coming. And then the next is onboard. The first 90 days that someone is with you is still part of the interview process. And this is a mindset shift, but I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. So stay tuned and make sure that you stay till the end here, because the onboarding piece is huge. So first, step 0. And I don't call this step 1. I call this step 0. And I call it step 0 for a reason. And that reason is this should be done before any of the other steps even have been thought about. The first thing is know what success is. Okay. So you need to slow down, because so often we get in a hiring mode where I need someone now, and then you just take any warm body. And if you just take a beat and define some things first, you're going to get a far better result. So instead of going to crisis mode, it's like we need somebody yesterday, which is very often what happens, then that starts you off on the wrong foot. You're feeling like you're the one who has to accept the candidate, or rather you have to accept whatever candidate is put to you. That is the way to do it on your heels. That is the way where you won't be really in charge or in control of whether you're getting good people. So most people don't spend enough time deciding what success looks like in the role. And that's where they get tripped up. They think they need, and I'm going to pick on customer support here, they think they need a customer support person, but they haven't really thought further than that. Maybe it's because they've got too many inbound customer inquiries and they just need that person now. Maybe somebody quit. They just need that now. And they haven't really thought about, well, what does success look like for this role? And that is the fundamental piece. Because if you don't do that, you're going to get bad fit candidates. You're going to get someone who just has a resume that kind of looks like what the last person was doing or what you think you need, but that doesn't tie to success in the company. So now you're never going to make that mistake again, and we're going to talk about how. And the how is using a position scorecard. And these come in various flavors, and I'm going to give you one here. But you use a position scorecard to get real clarity on what the position is and what success looks like. And you're going to use that to make the job post, to develop interview questions, and evaluate them once they've been hired. So this is really important, because before, in the old method of hiring, you'd say, I need a person who has this experience or fit these requirements. But that's not really what you want. You don't want the person who just fits those requirements. You want a person to fill a role that has a function in the business. And that function has success criteria. So when you use a scorecard, and you start with that, what does success look like for this person, this role that's going to be in the business? What does that look like? So this is the position scorecard. So here's an example of it. There's a downloadable template below so that you can have this yourself. Take a look at the screen, and then we're going to look at some of the things on there. So on the position scorecard, there'll be the name of the person when they're hired, what's the position, who they're reporting to, and the purpose of the job. And those are all just really basic things. But here's the interesting thing. We now have section 2, which is desired results. Objective measurements of success. So how do you know if this person is being successful in this role? So this role, let's say again, customer support, there are certain things that this person has to do to be successful. Maybe they have to answer a certain number of tickets per hour. Maybe they have to have a customer satisfaction rate of above X%. There could be a bunch of other things. Maybe they have to escalate certain tickets within a certain amount of time. Whatever those things are that are measurable, and you want to make as much measurable as possible, then what are they? Because once you know that, now you know how to measure the success of this person and what to hire for. Because you might end up looking for not the right resume, but somebody has certain communication skills, etc. So this is going to vary by role. And as you can see here, we've got these levels of super green, green, yellow, and red. And the way that that works is that you will put in numbers. So let's say it is minutes to respond to a ticket. And super green is under 1 minute. In other words, they are rocking it at responding to every ticket under 1 minute. Green is 1 to 2 minutes. Yellow is 2 to 5 minutes. And red is anything more than 5 minutes. Again, I'm just picking numbers here. So now you've said that in this role, you've got a stoplight. And the stoplight means you really want someone to be in the green and, the green zone, but they might be super green if they're awesome. But if they're in the yellow zone, well, that's not quite success in the role. So when you do this with all of the aspects that are measurables in the role, you now have a scorecard. And you can see that there's a column there that's called rating. And that rating column is when you're doing a review of this person, you can put in their rating. Are they super green, green, yellow, red? You can also use a scale, sometimes 1 through 5 scale on where they are in this. So with that, you now have an objective system of knowing if this person is successful. And this, as we're going to see as we go through this topic, is going to be useful also in crafting the job description, in the job posting. It is going to be useful for the hiring and the interviewing, etc. Then section 3 here, living our core values. These are just placeholder core values. You'll have your own. I've got a separate video on how to do that. But these are the core values for one of my companies, and it was excellence, enthusiasm, and teamwork. And once again, this scorecard of this person, whether they're being interviewed or whether they are being evaluated, is on the core values, because those are important. That's our social contract at the business. Is this person living those core values, or are they not really? Are they a bad fit? So once again, this is going to flow through to the job posting. It's going to flow through to everything in the interview process and then beyond. In section 4, skills and competencies. These are skills and competencies that this role needs to have, this person's role needs to have. And so you'll list a bunch of those. Again, there are other aspects of this scorecard below. This is just a screenshot here, so get the downloadable one below this video. But this gives you now some objective criteria for the role. You've taken a beat. This doesn't take long to do. You've taken a beat, and instead of just like slapping up a job description and just getting junky candidates through, you now really have crisped up what success looks like. So you have now complete clarity. And as I said, you use this to craft the job post, use this to develop interview questions, and I'm going to give you some templates, but you're going to use this scorecard to modify those templates, and then you're going to evaluate once this person is hired. Let's now look the next step, which is sourcing. So we took step 0, and we now know what we're looking for. So now we can source. So the best source of A players is existing A players, which is really interesting. If you have any A players in the organization, you want to see, do they know any other A players? Why? Because they like working with other A players. People who really want to perform well, want other high performers around them. They don't want the folks who are dragging the organization down. They want other high performers because it lets them perform at their best, and they want to do better. So the first stop is asking your A players, do they know anyone else? And that is a little trick, right? Because normally you think, oh, well, I'm going to go out to the wide world. First, ask your A players. You can ask your B players. They might have a good referral, but they don't always know what an A player is. And if you got any C and D and F and beyond players, they will rarely have a good referral. And the interesting thing is that a C player is more interested in protecting their job and being able to continue to hide from accountability. So asking them, they might actually not give you A players because they know that an A player is going to expose them. So they may have worked for A players in the past and they didn't do so well under those A players as a manager, and they kind of moved on from the job, and they don't want to be in that situation again. That's why they're a C player. So you don't necessarily want to ask those people, or if those people are suggesting a candidate, just be a little circumspect and understand that they may be trying to protect their own job, and don't get too caught up in the fact that this person, it came from internal recommendation. Who is doing the internal recommendation? But the best source is A players that your A players have already worked with. Other overlooked sources of candidates, your email list. If your company has an email list and it's the right kind of email list for either customers or partners, things, that's one other place that you can advertise open positions. And it's kind of exciting when you're sending to your email list, hey, we're hiring, because it speaks well. It shows that your company is potentially being successful. So that's a good messaging to have there. Organic social, that's so your social media, you can publish there. You can call up partners and say, hey, I'm looking for this kind of person. Do you know anyone? Because your partners might have other companies like yours as their partners, so they might know people. And then former team members. If you've worked with former A players, go and reach out and say, do you know anybody? Because you want that A player network working for you. The next principle is an important mindset shift, and that is that job postings are advertisements. Now, you don't think of it as an advertisement, but it is an advertisement. You are advertising in the same way that you advertise to get customers. You're advertising to get team. So you have to think of this entire process as a sales funnel, or an advertising to marketing to sales funnel. And it's very similar. It's a complete analog when you are getting team members, because you're using the process to sift and screen for the best, in this case, team members, and in the sales context, the best customers, right? And you don't want to necessarily take every customer, because some customers are terrible customers. If you're in a services business, they're the kind that are a complete pain in your butt. If you are in a product business, they're the refunders. Those are the equivalent to the C and D and F players in terms of team members. So you're doing the same process, and you're using your process, as I often talk about in the sales and marketing context in other videos. You're using the process to get good fit people through, or good fit customers through. Here, we are going to look at this, and the ad, the job posting, is a job ad, and that's the first thing it needs to do. So the standard job posting is, here's the job requirements. Now, that advertisement is not doing its job, right? It's saying, we just need someone who kind of looks like this. But that's not really filtering people out, because someone can say, sure, I look like that. Why not? I'll spam a bunch of resumes. The post needs to attract good people and repel bad people. And a good job posting describes the kind of person who will be successful, not their resume, the kind of person who will be successful. So describe who you are as a company. That's the first thing. And who they are and why it matters. All right. So it's not just, we're looking for a customer support rep with 3 to 5 years of experience and blah, 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 must be highly organized and have good communication skills. Well, anyone can say they do that. And is that really exciting, right? For an A player to say that, they're just looking for that resume. We need to make it exciting for the A players. And here's how we do it. So why it works is the mediocre folks, they care about the position and the money. So your standard job posting is a bad advertisement, because it's attracting anyone who's like, sure, I'll take that position. That title looks good. And does the money work? And that's what they care about. That's what mediocre team members care about. Great employees, A players, they care about the mission, the value, and the team. Now, they need to be respected with money, obviously, and they need to feel like the position is not taking them off the track, but that's the table stakes. They're really in it to build the team, and they want to be a part of something bigger. And that's your job, is to sell them on that and sell the right people on that. So that's what this process does, because it's an ad. So the job is to attract those. So you need to sell the reader. You need to tell the story of why your business and why this job matters to them. Describe what they will do and why they will matter. Right? You're telling them, if you want to be on this ride with us and fulfill this mission, then you are in the right place. A players will love that. The more you can tell how you are different, the better. It's not just a generic job posting. Generic job postings attract generic, mediocre team members. So once again, I'm not going to go into detail here. This is a sample. There are templates below. You can get copies of them. You can modify them, but you want to sell the reader. And when you look at this example, you're going to go and you'll see some unique aspects of it that most job ads don't have. So it says unique job with a great company. Do you want an exciting job you love, working with other superstars? Are you excited about making a real difference for the customers you work with? Join us as a member success manager. So just in the first sentence, it's talking about someone who wants an exciting job, working with other superstars. Oh, well, superstars. Well, if I'm a mediocre talent and I don't want to be called out by superstars, I don't want to work that hard, I just want to coast, we're already starting to turn off those bad fit candidates. And we're trying to turn on to the ones that are superstars, they're A players. So even in the first sentence, we're doing that. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but it then goes and talks about the role. It talks about the systems and the programs that we have are well-defined. In other words, superstars know that we've thought about systems and process. We're not just making it up. It's a no-crisis organization. So that, of course, these are specific to this specific company of mine, but you can do the same thing, and you take this template and then you put it in your own details. So again, downloadable below. So now we've got a good job ad, a good job posting, because it's an advertisement. Now we are going to start getting resumes, and let's start filtering. That's the next step. So resumes suck. This is my big conclusion from hiring hundreds, if not thousands, of people in my organizations. Don't just collect resumes. People think it's a numbers game. It's not, it's a quality game. And just collecting resumes for the sake of collecting resumes is not necessarily going to get you the right result. And we remember that resumes are their marketing. It is not reality. It's their marketing. And nowadays, you can slap together a resume, you can have AI write a whole bunch of it, and half the time, a lot of the recruiting systems are using filters that include AI. So it's just robots talking to robots. It's their marketing. And you will very often get spammed with low-thought applications. They're just going to throw in their resume. If you've ever heard that phrase, it's like, oh, well, I'm not really looking, but I'll throw in my resume. So that's just a low-effort application. They're not really invested in you. So they've taken minimal effort, and all of a sudden, that means you have to incur a whole bunch of effort in screening this resume. There's an imbalance here, right? If you're the prize because you have an A-player organization. Why are they giving you work? It should be the opposite. All right. So the job post should have screened out some of them, and you will give good candidates a lot of time in this process. So you're not shorting the good candidates. But at this point in the entire process, if you give every candidate an equal amount of time, you will waste a ton of time. So you need to screen. So what we do is we use assessment questions. There are specific questions in the job app that ask them to do more than just shoot a resume in. They have to do something. They have to put a little bit of effort into it. Right? And that tiniest bit of effort that we're asking them to put into the application process is going to really screen out 90-something% of the people who are just throwing in a resume. And I don't want you to think that all of a sudden I won't get enough resumes. If you're not getting enough resumes because you've put in these assessment questions, something else is wrong. You either need to spend more on whatever resume platform you're putting it on, you need to put it on more social media, etc. You can't lower the bar just to get more applications, because if you're lowering the bar to get more applications, you're going to get shittier applications. So you want to increase the hurdle to apply. And I would rather, personally, have 2 really well-qualified people applying than 100 unqualified people applying, and most of them are duds anyway. So I'm going to have this illusion that I've got a good candidate somewhere, and then I actually don't. So that's what I don't want to do. So it's going to increase the hurdle to apply, and they should want to work with you based on the ad copy. And again, when you look at the example ad copy, you'll see why. And these assessment questions are getting a chance to see their skills even before you pick up the phone or you do a Zoom interview or whatever you're doing. You get to see some skills even beforehand. All right. So the best way that I've found to do this is ask them to submit some answer in a video of no more than 3 minutes. All right. So you're going to learn a lot by doing this. Number one, a whole bunch of people are just not going to do it. Number two, a whole bunch of them will not follow directions and do something like submit it in a video, but they're going to upload the video to YouTube and then not set the privileges so you can't see, click it, and then you get access denied. They're going to not follow directions. And that tells you a lot. That tells you that this person doesn't follow directions. Well, how good are they going to be? They're putting the best foot forward now, trying to get the job. How good are they going to be if they're on their best behavior now and they're screwing up? So it's an artificial hurdle, but it's an important one. And then if they have to do something on a video of no more than 3 minutes, you're going to get to see how they communicate. Now, importantly, I don't want to judge anyone based on whether they're comfortable on camera. And a lot of people aren't. And you can put that in the job ad to say, we're not looking for someone to be really good on camera. We're looking for how you think about problem X, problem Y, these questions. So they've put in that effort and they put in some thought, and you're going to see how they communicate and whether or not they can organize their thoughts in a pre-recorded video. It's not like you're asking them to do, dance right now. It's a pre-recorded video. So this is going to be a way that you can really assess before putting in much effort. Because again, we're filtering out 90-something% of the people who don't really care. They're not putting any effort, or they're not following directions. And now you're left with a much better pool of potential A players. So once again, selling the reader, there are some example job screening questions here that's in the downloads. I'm not going to go over them here, but we've got a whole raft of them. This is just some of them shown on this screen, but download the full list and pick and choose the ones that work best for you, modify them. The point is the process, and the process has to be relevant to you. I've given you a great starting point here. Now you're going to filter based on those responses, and you're going to just quickly triage out the ones that can't be saved. Right? We talk about this triage, just like in a hospital emergency room, people are wheeled in, and you triage the ones that are not going to make it for the ones that might make it. And you're just going to triage out the ones that aren't going to make it. All right. Like, for instance, bad language skills. They're giving careless answers, not really thoughtful. Maybe they're not even answering the question. They didn't follow the directions. And once you screen those out, you've saved yourself so much time. And that is the key to this step. And for some positions, it's not worth testing your job ad. You can test different copy, etc. But I have in the past gotten 11 times more applications by testing the job title and the copy of it. So this can be interesting when you are in the position where I'm not sure that I'm going to get enough applications. You can tweak things. And you can look up my other materials on scientific entrepreneurship, but the testing methodologies that we use there can get you way more applications. So I had one position where we put out an ad and we were getting 30-ish people applying, and none of them were really great. Made some tweaks and we got nearly 400 applications for the same position, posted in the same places, but we changed how that ad worked. So just a little plug there for thinking about the fact that don't just slap something on the paper. Think about very carefully what you're trying to say. And then if it's not working, tweak it. Don't just hammer the same thing again. Something happened, and use those principles of scientific entrepreneurship, again, all available in other videos, to make sure that it's on point and that you're getting better at this and that you're getting good data. So we filtered now. Now we're on to the pre-screen. So we are pre-screening before we talk with anybody. All right. So the first thing is check them out on social media. You may be very, very surprised about what you find. This is one of the things, and can matter more or less. In some of my businesses, they were in regulated industries. You really wanted to be very careful about that. For other ones where it's kind of back office and these roles, it's less important, but it's still worth the check because you never know what you find. And one thing that you can think about is looking at their social media, which can be very often extremely candid, and lining that up with the core values of your business. And you might find an immediate mismatch. The behavior of this person is inconsistent with a core value of your business. And really the fundamental of the person and how they want to be seen in the world because they're posting it, or their nature is inconsistent with your core values. You're trying to fit this square peg in a round hole. It's not going to work long term. So you'll learn a lot from the screening step if they're posting regularly on social media. So at this step, you don't want to do a full-on interview. We're going to do another triage, and I call it the triage call. And it is a 10-minute phone screen to screen out the bad fit candidates. So just 10 minutes. You're only dedicating 10 minutes because at this point, once again, we're just looking for A players. We don't want to just fill the chair, right? If you're just going to fill the chair, maybe just hire a temp or something to fill the chair. But we don't want our team getting stuffed with a bunch of B and C players because they tend to multiply like rabbits. It's crazy. You want to make sure that you have high gates, and this is one of those gates. So again, you're filtering out bad language skills, incoherent answers, lack of motivation. If they can't remember your job posting, well, how important is it to them then? If they're not enthusiastic, you're getting the next layer from that video you asked them to submit. So that video that you asked them to submit will have triaged out a bunch of people. But at this point, now they have to think live. And now you can ask them some questions and you can really get a better sense. But very importantly, don't do this just based on whether or not you like them. Because you will find, just like we talked about on that little 3-minute video, that some people are just, not good on camera. That's cool. That's okay. Maybe this job does not require that. And likewise, whether or not you like them has little bearing on whether or not they're going to do well in the role. That's why we did the position scorecard at the beginning. You're measuring them against that, not against whether you like them or whether they are like you. Those are the really big problems in how most people interview. It's did I like the person? Well, that's just a piece of it. And frankly, a pretty small piece, because if you want a high-performing organization, you won't always get someone who you're going to want to go out after work with. You may, and that's fantastic if you do, but you may get someone who will be an awesome team member who you want to be in the trenches with for years. And that is a real win. So again, I've got screening interview questions. That is another download. So I'm equipping you with everything you need here to start out, and you can just crib mine, you can modify them, but here are my screening interview questions. I have used a version of these for over 15 years now, maybe going on 20 years, and they really work well for me. So use those screening interview questions. The next step is optional. You can do some external testing to see how they interact and their innate modes of operation. In other words, people don't even realize that they react in certain ways And some of these tests bring that out. Some tests, there's DISC, there's Colby, there's Strength Finder, there's a whole bunch of those. I have used many of them. I don't view any of these as a magic bullet. So some people are really sold on, well, if this person doesn't meet the certain DISC profile, they're not a good fit. I personally don't believe in that. I believe that these are discussion tools that can be insightful, but are not going to be determinative. You may think differently. I view these as a nice to have, and it really helps with managing a person once they're on board. But I don't view these as a requirement that a person has a certain score or a certain combination on these types of tests. But it's optional, but useful. So now you've pre-screened, and now interviews. So we're going to do interviews a little bit differently because, again, we're not going to do the standard get 3 resumes, take all the resumes, top 3, and interview them, and then pick the best. We're going to do something different here. So remember that the resume, it's a marketing document, all right? And my view is it doesn't really matter unless there's some big red flags on it. So if there's a big gap where they haven't been working for a long period of time, or the roles that they're in are kind of wonky, or there's anything like suspicious about it, then definitely ask about that and drill into it. But the resume is not the end all be all, because remember, that is their document. And we are talking about your process, not their document. So you need to own this process. And you can't own the process if the discussion is about their marketing document. So the wrong way to do an interview is to go through everything in their resume. Now, there's a place for that, asking about specific things on the resume, but it shouldn't be a, well, what did you do here? Well, what did you do here? Well, what did you do here? And I know some people like to do that and ask, well, what did you accomplish and all these things? And there's a place for that as additional information. But what you care about is not where they worked and the role and how much money they made. We care about how they thought about it and what they learned. And that's a very different thing. So you can use the resume just as a list of the places they've worked. So you can ask, what did you take away from this? What did you learn? What experiences? How did you think about? Because you're learning how they are thinking about approaching problems. Because an A player thinks about how they approach problems. A, B, C through the F player, they show up and they're like, tell me what to do. And now they've outsourced their thinking to you, and you have an organization where you or your management team is running around trying to tell everyone what to do, instead of having people who think about what needs to be done and recommend to you how it should be done. That changes the dynamic entirely at the company. So the biggest predictor of success is how they respond to specific situations, because how they've responded in the past is very indicative of how they're going to respond in the future. How they think about the problem, what they did, how they approached it. Those are the kinds of questions that we want to be getting to the heart of in the interview process. So there are 2 kinds of interviews that we can use for this. Number 1 is the behavioral interview. What would you do in this situation? It's a hypothetical question. And the good thing is, A players are much better at hypotheticals than a C player who is kind of a drone. And they're not good at hypotheticals, right? Well, I would refer to the manual. That's not what you want. And then simulation interviews, where you simulate the work environment. They're 2 very different kinds of interviews, because one is asking a hypothetical what if question, and the other one is like, hey, let's pretend to work together. And I'm going to show you how to do both of those. So the first is the behavioral interview, where you give them a situation and ask how they have dealt with the situation or they would deal with the situation. And again, we're going to learning how they think, how they approach problems. We're learning how independent they are, like what they would do, and we're getting a preview of their judgment. So you might want to throw them a couple of curveball here, where there isn't necessarily a right answer. So think about that. You want to challenge them in these behavioral interviews, where there could be a way that they could do it wrong, but you're not going to judge them on what answer they pick. You're going to be judging them on how they think through the process, because the job of your team members is to free you and free the organization, because this role is just being handled. And that happens when they have a clear thought process and you can trust how they come to decisions, right? That's the key part. And that's what behavioral interviews are getting at. So once again, I have templates for you. They are free. Go get them down below. Download them. A whole bunch of behavioral interview questions. This example, I've used these for over 30 years. A long time. So you may modify some of them. In each one of these examples, you can only see a piece of the document here. There's a whole bunch more that are not shown, but it's downloadable. You will see there's a category like homework, worker bee, judgment. Those are just tags, and those tags are associating a certain quality that we wanted in this particular job role. Homework. Tell me what you know about our company, that kind of behavioral question. That's just a screening question. Like, does this person actually care about this job? These are all categories, and then there's a whole bunch of these. So again, you are going to make this specific to your organization. Next, simulation interview. This is fun. So this is where you take a real project, a real situation that you've worked on, and you alter it, you anonymize it, and you have them do a real-time exercise that is relevant to their job. A recent thing that I've been experimenting with in one of our companies is actually a situation where they have to do something and they're live on Slack and they have to Slack back and forth with you, or whatever chat, Microsoft Teams or whatever messaging platform you're using. They have to accomplish a project, and there's a resource, another team member, simulating a real situation that they can chat with on Slack. So you're going to learn a couple of things. You're going to learn what their work product is. You're going to learn what their work pace is. You're going to learn what kind of questions they ask, and you're going to learn how they communicate, because this is a live communication thing. And that's something you almost never get with hiring. It's almost like in the traditional process, it's a black box. You don't really know how they work until they're hired, and you give them the desk, and they may or may not have good communication skills. They may or may not have good thinking skills. Here, we're getting a preview of all of that. This last bullet point, you'll be amazed at who can dance and who can't. It's going to be really interesting, because you might not realize how much of a marketing document that resume is and how garbagey a lot of those resumes are. They're not true to reality when it comes to this simulation. So the simulation of, go back to the customer support example, of actually answering customer support calls live, that would be a simulation. And maybe they're simulated calls. You got someone else actually calling in, and they're answering those live, and they can chat to someone who's their supervisor, or it might be a different role, a marketing role. And it's like, hey, put together a campaign on a short deadline. Here's what the campaign needs to be. Your manager, me, the interviewer, is going to be on Slack, and you can ask me questions, and you're going to see how they think, and you're going to see how long it takes, and you're going to see the work product. So this is a really cool way of doing that. So you will learn a ton, and it's kind of the principle. I forget who says it. Oh, it's Seth Godin. I can't work with you until I've worked with you. I love that quote, because why would you offer someone a position? Why would you go ahead and work with someone unless you have some idea of what they're going to do? Otherwise, you're taking all this risk. And what if it turns out badly, and you spend all this money, you spend all this time, and you got to do it again? So this simulation interview goes a long way to solving that problem. Next is listening. And this is for you to listen. So A players are attracted to the opportunity to get to their goals. They have goals. They have goals of their own. That's why they're an A player. They want to do something. So if you spend a lot of time in the interview really understanding what people want and listening to them, you will understand if this role can get them where they want to go. And you can sell them on the fact that you might be able to modify this role, or they have a path. And it's like a sales call, right? In a sales call, if you're doing all the talking, you're losing the sale. You have to do a lot of listening, because you have to understand, in a sales context, where's the customer? What do they want? Can my solution get them to where they want? Remember, we talked about this whole thing being like a sales funnel, like an advertisement? Here, at this point, you've gone through a lot of gates. That means that it is highly likely that you have a good candidate that's quite possibly an A player, and that person is right there. And you are partially selling by listening. You're selling their opportunity to work with your team, and that is a rare thing, because it's a superstar team. Because also as a leader, your role is getting them closer to what they want. And by doing that, and by taking that as the frame where you can really help them succeed in their career, you are going to give them the opportunity to do that, and then they are going to give their best to your team. One note on group interviews. I have done this sometimes, and it can be very powerful. I haven't done it in a few years, to be honest, but it is a really cool way of interviewing. And for the right roles, it can make a lot of sense, because you can get a ton of leverage. So if you're hiring a bunch of people at once, like you're staffing a large department, a group interview can be a great way to separate the wheat from the chaff. You see how they interact also. You're seeing how they interact with each other, with people they've never met. It's giving you a preview of their first few weeks at the job. You're going to see how they contribute, they interact, how they think, and don't necessarily just look for the ones who take charge. Sometimes the extroverts take charge and maybe the introverts need a chance to speak. So you intervene in a group interview and you make sure everyone is speaking. Then you get them talking with each other, make sure everyone's participating. So there's a little bit of an art to it, but it can be a very effective way of taking a group of 10 and whittling it down to 2 or 3 from that 10 if you've got a really good pool, because you've followed all the other tips that I've had here, including scientific way of making your ad be really effective. So really interesting thing and can be very effective for the right kinds of positions. So you've interviewed and now you've selected a candidate. Let's talk about onboarding. And this is something that you're going to want to understand, because a lot of companies screw this up and it taints the relationship from the beginning, and then they end up with a B player instead of an A player. The first 90 days. So the interview does not end at this point. The interview does not end when they get hired and they show up. You need a 30, 60, 90-day objective expectations. Now, we're going to harken back to the scorecard, and we're going to talk about it in a second, but they're still interviewing. I talked about, I can't work with you till I've worked with you. They're still interviewing at this point. It is better to realize in the first 90 days that something is not working out because you've had criteria, you've followed the criteria, and it's better to fire fast than to just let it slide. And I will fully admit that this is very hard. And sometimes you get sidetracked. We recently, in one of my companies, we had this situation where circumstances changed. The conditions on the ground needed to be at days 60 and 90, so we let it slide, and that was not the best situation. We have to let someone go. So it's easy to screw this up, even when you have a process. So having a process is the way to make sure that you are not going to completely screw this up every single time, because if you don't have a scorecard, you're just going to let it slide and slide and slide, and these B players and C players will stick around for like a year, and that is really toxic to maintaining the A players in your organization. So it is better to fire fast, and you're going to do this with this 30, 60, 90 plan. And as a part of this, have them create documentation during their 90-day onboarding. You want to see how they document their own job. Even if it's already documented, you're having them update that documentation. You're having them train other people as they are trained. You are seeing how they really internalize their role. And you can do that by not making them into a robot. You do that by challenging them to think and contribute in a bigger way. That's, again, what the A players will do. So by challenging people to contribute and really help their team members, everybody wins. Your new candidate, your new hire wins, your existing team win, you win, your customers win, everybody wins when you do that. So here's a 30, 60, 90 plan. I've got an example for you, again, downloadable. So this is an example for a marketing assistant. In these cases, we have 15, 30 days, 45 days, so it's broken out a little more. But regardless, this is an example of a plan that you can download, modify for your own purposes. And we talked about remembering the position scorecard. At the 30 and 60 and 90, you can use this. So these measurables that you thought about before you even put together the job ad, the measurables are there. So you now know, is this person on track? And if they're not on track, you can assist them to get on track. Maybe they don't really understand the role, right? You should have talked about this position scorecard during the interview process, obviously, because this is what success looks like. But do they really understand it? Are they having challenges? Where are they having challenges? It's your early warning system. So this is definitely something to remember in this 30, 60, 90. So a few bonus strategies for you. These are fun. Hard-earned lessons on motivation. Motivation is the hardest thing to screen for. I, to be honest, have never really fully unlocked interviewing for motivation, but you can see in the 30, 60, 90. And motivation is one of those things to watch for, and it may not fully be on a scorecard because you don't really want them necessarily knowing that you're judging them on motivation, but you'll see it because no one can keep their guard up and pretend to be motivated for 90 days. Pretty much no one. And at that point, if they're simulating it for 90 days, they'll probably keep on simulating it and actually be motivated. But they'll put on a good face and they'll like really work hard for the first 30 days, maybe 60 days, and then it'll start falling off by the 90 days. So just watch for motivation because it's extremely hard to screen for in the original interview process. And that's why I say the real interview continues for the next 90 days because you're watching for motivation, the hardest thing to screen for. We never bypass this process is the next item. And I've gotten flack for never bypassing the process. In one of my businesses many, many years ago, we had a friend of a friend referred someone to us. And it was me and my business partner. And a friend of one of my friends referred in a resume and said, oh, well, can I get an interview? And my business partner was the one doing the screenings and the interviews. So I said, great, I've sent it over to my partner. He's doing all of that. And I got a bunch of shit for that. It was like, well, what do you mean? Like, why can't, I know you, why can't you just put me in the process? We didn't deviate from the process, because the second you start deviating from the process, you don't have a process. If I had slotted this person in as a preferred candidate, all of a sudden, all of the incentives are off. Now my partner, who was tasked with doing this evaluation, has another candidate slide in who might not have gone through all of the gates, and they might not actually be a good candidate. So don't ever deviate on this. Never bypass the process. And you can tell people, like, we are very strict. We have a process. Absolutely happy to take your recommendation, your friend, whatever, and we'll give them accord them every amount of the process that we have. We'll make sure that they are the resume is looked at, but you can't guarantee an outcome. Just don't bypass the process. Every time that I have bypassed the process because of, like, I knew somebody or there was some exigent circumstance, like, oh, we really need someone now, it's been a bad result. Just don't do it. Another item in the job ad, do not contact us outside this process. Now that's a great filter, because especially with the spammers, the resume spammers, they'll be like, here's my resume. And then they'll like hit you up on LinkedIn direct messages or something else, and they'll spam you. It's like, have you seen my resume? Or like, here's another copy of it. If you add this, do not contact us outside this process, those super annoying people will be filtered out. And it's another way of you not getting spammed, so that people don't try to come in outside the process, because if someone does, they get knocked out of the process. They didn't follow directions. And then again, I can't work with you until I've worked with you. Just remember that phrase. It's a great phrase. Next is always be hiring. So having a job opening always listed in case the perfect team member comes along is a great aspirational thing. Sometimes it's hard to do, especially when it costs money to have job posts up on various job boards. But it can be very worth it, especially if your company is of a certain size, because you always want to have these lines in the water, right? These fishing lines in the water, looking for those A players. So it can be, in the smaller organization, it can be hard to afford to always do this in terms of time and attention and money. But as the company grows, try to have this as one of the things that you are always doing. Always be hiring, always be looking for the next great team member, because a great team member will 10x what a mediocre team member will do. I can't underemphasize how much this can change the organization. Other bonus, reference check strategies. So I've got a bunch of templates on reference check strategies, including how you can really get the truth in a reference check, because sometimes you call the references and like, oh yeah, they were great, and they're bullshitting you, or they just want to get off the phone. Here's some ways that you can ask questions that really get to the heart of the matter and get to the truth of it. So again, downloadable, it's free, go get it. And so that wraps it up for this piece of the hiring puzzle. So when you do this, you will get A player talent. And when you don't deviate from the process and you put these gates in place, it feels heavier. I know it feels heavier, but the results are so worth it. Imagine if you had this 10x more productive person in the organization by you putting a little more effort into the front end. It makes your life so much better. Right now, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you to upgrade your team to a team of all A players. There has not been a single time that I have done this process and not been super happy that I've upgraded the team around me. It has allowed me to get so much leverage that has allowed the company to grow and has allowed every team member to do their best work and actually advance themselves in their career. It is the biggest win-win-win between yourself and the employee, and also the customers will also win. When you get a great well-oiled machine of people that are elevating each other in the organization, it lets you take a step back, stop micromanaging, stop putting out fires. So I'm going to challenge you to do exactly that. So of course, all of the downloads that we talked about during this presentation are below, but also if you want to learn more about the process of scientific entrepreneurship that I talked about during this video, you can find more about that right here.